The tomato. What would Italian food be without it? Yet, before the 1500s, Italians didn't even know it existed. And many foods that are now commonplace, like bananas and oranges, weren't known in the Americas before then. Throughout history, foods have traveled from place to place with important consequences. Take the humble potato. Our story begins here, in the Andes Mountains of South America. High altitudes and harsh conditions make it difficult to grow crops, yet here the potato flourished. By the early 1500s, the native population had been cultivating potatoes in the region for more than 3,000 years. The Spanish explorers arriving in South America at that time encountered not only the people of the Andes, but the potato as well. One Spaniard, the conquistador Pedro de Cieza de Leon, bravely tasted this curious food.
It is a kind of earth nut, which, after it has been boiled, is as tender as a cooked chestnut.
Eventually, the potato became part of something historians call the Columbian Exchange. This series of transfers between the Eastern and Western hemispheres changed the world. Certain foods, animals, and diseases moved from one hemisphere to the other for the first time. As part of the exchange, the potato arrived in Spain in the late 1500s, and it was soon introduced into other countries, including Italy, England, Germany, Belgium, and France. But many Europeans feared this new food. In the Burgundy region of France, a law even prohibited people from eating potatoes. A report from 1620 documents this.
The Burgundians are forbidden to make use of these tubers because they are assured that the eating of them causes leprosy.
In other parts of Europe, however, potatoes were accepted as a novelty food by the aristocracy. The ruling classes in these countries knew that the hardy potato would grow when other crops might fail, so they urged their subjects to grow and eat potatoes to prevent famine. When some peasants resisted the unfamiliar food, strong measures were used to persuade them. For example, King Frederick II of Prussia threatened to cut off the noses and ears of peasants who wouldn't grow and eat potatoes. His threat worked. Eventually, potatoes became an important food throughout Europe. They helped reduce malnutrition and fed a rapidly growing population. And nowhere was the impact of the potato greater than in Ireland. Here, peasants worked on land owned by wealthy landlords. In return for their labor, the peasants did not earn wages. Instead, they were allowed to live on the land and keep a small portion of what they grew to feed their families. The potato was an ideal food. Growing it required few tools and only a small amount of labor and land. Potatoes from a small plot of land could feed an entire family for a year. By 1845, the average adult in Ireland ate between 9 and 14 pounds of potatoes a day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, day in, day out. But this dependence on potatoes would soon prove fatal. In the 1840s, a devastating fungus arrived in Ireland. It spread rapidly through the potato crops. Almost overnight, entire fields of potato plants were transformed into black slime. Famine and starvation spread quickly. The peasants had no substitute for the potatoes that rotted. They couldn't afford other food, and they received very little help from the landlords or the government. Irish peasants suffered greatly. One witness wrote,
Although a man not easily moved, I confess myself unmanned by the extent and intensity of suffering I witnessed. Women and little children were scattered over the fields, devouring the raw turnips and shivering in the snow and sleet, uttering exclamations of despair.
Of Ireland's population of 8 million, about 1 million died of starvation and disease. Another 1.5 million emigrated to places like the United States. This wave of Irish immigration created a large Irish-American community and changed American politics and culture. Think about it. The introduction of the potato into Europe had dramatic consequences. It helped to feed a rapidly expanding population, but also led to a devastating famine. But the potato wasn't the only food to make its mark on history. Sugar was another. This food comes from sugarcane, which was first grown thousands of years ago in southern Asia. In time, the cultivation of sugarcane spread to China, Persia, and Egypt. And many people developed a craving for this rare and costly sweetener. In the 12th century, crusaders returning from Syria brought news of sugar back to Europe. One of them, Jacques de Vitry, wrote this:
There is a reed from which flows a very sweet juice. This honey the Syrians eat with bread and melt with water, and think it more wholesome than the honey of bees. With the juice of this reed, our men often stayed their hunger.
Although many Europeans soon began to crave sugar, it was extravagantly expensive. Having and displaying sugar became a status symbol. In 1513, Portugal's king had life-size statues of the Pope and 12 cardinals crafted out of sugar. He sent these to Rome as a gift. In the 16 and 1700s, the demand for sugar skyrocketed, fueled by the increasing popularity of coffee, tea, and chocolate. To meet the expanding demand, sugarcane was introduced into parts of South America and islands in the Caribbean, where it thrived. Merchants and traders made fortunes. Soon the Dutch, the French, and the English were waging battles for control of these lands. But growing and harvesting sugarcane was dangerous, back-breaking work. In one of history's sadder chapters, millions of Africans were enslaved as plantation owners turned to slave labor to meet the increasing demand for sugar. Between 1450 and 1870, at least 11 million Africans were captured and sold to slave traders. Chained and shackled, they were sent by ship to work on plantations in North and South America and the Caribbean. On the way, as many as 20%, over 2 million, died. Conditions on the sugar plantations were deadly as well. It is estimated that by 1700, one enslaved worker died for every ton of sugar produced. One witness to the sugar trade wrote this:
There is not one barrel of sugar comes to Europe which is not stained with blood.
The demand for the sweet taste of sugar transplanted a crop halfway around the world, transforming diets, landscapes, and lives. Its effect is still seen today. Descendants of enslaved Africans make up significant percentages of Caribbean and Latin American populations. Two foods that have changed our world. Because of this, some people lived longer, healthier lives, but others faced famine and life in a new country. And because of this, many people became wealthy, while millions of others were enslaved, and a region of the world was transformed.